In this video, we'll be looking at congruent polygons and what it means to be congruent. The definition here says congruent polygons are the same shape and the same size. They have congruent angles and sides. So when we talk about two polygons being congruent, all their sides have to be congruent to another polygon's sides, and all their angles have to be congruent to another polygon's angles. So if you look at triangle BIG and triangle COW, you'll notice that the angles match up. And then I could also, if I want to show sides, I would have to put the little congruent tick marks to show that the sides also match up. And therefore, I can say triangle BIG is congruent to triangle COW. An important thing to look at here is their corresponding parts. In other words, what does angle B correspond to in this triangle? Well, angle B is congruent to angle C. So B and C are corresponding parts. Angle I corresponds to angle O. I is congruent to O. Angle I is congruent to angle O. And finally, angle G is congruent to angle W. You can also see that segment BI, oops, sorry about that, segment BI is congruent to segment CO. Segment IG is congruent to segment OW. And finally, segment BG is congruent to segment CW. And then the most important thing I want you to get from this part that I listed out is when you compare the triangle to triangle, you'll see that B goes first and C goes first. So angle B is congruent to angle C. Angle I is congruent to angle O because they're the second letters. Angle G is congruent to angle W because those are the corresponding parts. Segment BI is congruent to segment CO. You can compare across. So here I give you triangle TEX is congruent to triangle WIN. I want you to pause the video and list the corresponding parts, the congruent corresponding parts, including both the angles and the sides. So what you should have gotten is angle T is congruent to angle W because those are the first letters. Angle E is congruent to angle I because those are the second letters. Angle X is congruent to angle N because those are the third letters. For segments, if you look at the first two, they're TE, and that should be congruent to WI. If you look at the second and third letters, that's EX is congruent to IN. And finally, we know that there's three sides to a triangle, so the first and the third letter would be TX is congruent to WN. So those are the congruent corresponding parts. All right, so we have polygon ABCD is congruent to polygon STQR. Before we even look at this stuff down here, let's look at and see what angle A corresponds to. Well, angle A is the first letter, so it corresponds to the first letter, which is S. So angle A is congruent to angle S. So while the polygon might be reflected, we can still compare the letters. So we know that angle D, for example, would be congruent to angle R. So let's see what we got. Measure of angle S equals, well, measure of angle S is going to be the same as measure of angle A because they're congruent. And angle A is 110, so S is also 110 degrees. Measure of angle Q will be the same as measure of angle C, which is 70, so measure of angle Q equals 70 degrees. AB, so the first two letters will be the same as ST. Let's see, ST is 8, so AB will also be 8. And finally, AD, the first and fourth, is the same as SR. SR is 12, so AD will also be 12. Make sure you can line up the corresponding parts. All right, let's try this one together. Triangle CRH is congruent to triangle ONE. So I'm giving you angle C, which is right here, angle H, which is right here, and angle O, which is right here. You might be tempted to try to add these three up and equal them to 180, but I'm only giving you two of the three angles in a triangle. What you do see, however, is that angle C is congruent to angle O. So if I know C and O, I can say 6x minus 8 equals 4x plus 6. And let's go ahead and solve that. Subtract 4x from both sides. Gives you 2x minus 8 equals 6. Add 8 to both sides. 2x equals 14. And divide by 2, so x equals 7. It's important to see which angles are congruent so we can set them equal. So angle O is going to be 4 times 7 plus 6, which is 28 plus 6, which equals 34 degrees. Angle N, oh, I don't know that, nor do I know R, so I'm going to come back to that. So this is 34. Angle E is the same as angle H. Okay, angle H I can figure out. Plug in 7. 2 times 7 is 14, minus 4 is 10. And these three angles have to form a triangle, so they have to have to 180. So 180 minus 34 minus 10 gives you 180 minus 44, which equals 136 degrees for angle E. All right, pause the video and try this one on your own. All right, we got AB, which is right here. We got BC, which is right here, and EF, which is right here. Well, I know that AB equals EF, because that's the first two letters. So 4x minus 2 equals 2x plus 8. Let's subtract the 2x on both sides. 2x minus 2 equals 8. Add 2. 2x equals 10. And finally divide by 2, so x equals 5. And it wants to know FG, which is the same thing as BC. So 3 times 5 is 15, plus 6 is 21. All right, let's look at some triangles real quick, and we'll call it good on this. Of course, triangles follow the same rules as polygons. Two triangles are congruent when they have three pairs of congruent corresponding sides and three pairs of congruent corresponding angles. So you got three sides that match up and three angles that match up, and you know that this missing one, of course, would just be 50. So, can we conclude that figures are congruent? Well, let's look at it. We know triangle has to have to 180, so the missing angle here would be 44 and 44. So it looks like I have three angles that are congruent, but I only have one pair of sides that will be congruent, and those actually don't even match up. I don't know anything about the other angles. If I drew these triangles separately, which is sometimes a good strategy, you get 44 and 46. And I'm going to take this triangle here, I'm going to flip it so it looks like the other one. So you get 46 at the bottom and 44 at the top. And you'll notice that these are actually no longer corresponding to each other. You got this side here and this side down, well, over here. So the 46 and 44 no longer correspond, so we cannot conclude that these two triangles are congruent. What do you think about this one? Look at it for a second and think about it. Are these two triangles congruent? Well, the answer, of course, is going to have to be no. While the 10 and 10 may match and the 12 and 12 may match, the 6 and the 4 do not match. Therefore, you cannot conclude those are congruent. And final last one. This one takes a second, so pause the video and tell me if these two triangles are congruent. All right, hopefully you filled in the missing angles. You know triangle adds up to 180, so that makes this 60. Vertical angles are congruent, so this is 60. You have two parallel lines cut by transversal, so all interior angles are congruent. And finally, a third angle is 60. So all the angles match up. And if a triangle is equiangular, it's also equilateral. So if this is 8, that means this is 8. If this is 8, that means this is 8. So it looks like all the sides and angles do match up, so I can actually conclude that these two triangles are congruent.